All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Survivor Space and today's Survivor Circle session. My name is Becky Perkins. I'm the Survivor Support Specialist with Zero Abuse Project and super excited to welcome Melanie and Diane today. I can't wait for this discussion. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. So today's session is being recorded. So if you need to step away for your schedule or for your self-care, please feel free to do that. The recording will be available on the Survivor Space website and also on Zero Abuse Project's YouTube channel later today. Also, if you're attending today, your video and your audio are disabled, and that is for your privacy. So don't worry, we can't see you, we can't hear you, but please feel free to utilize the chat feature. The button is at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to type in a question or a comment at any point during the conversation today. When you do that, you have the option of choosing your audience for your question or comment. Everyone means the three of us plus folks who are attending, or you can choose just for the three of us to receive your question or your comment. And one last quick note before we get started, we'd always like to acknowledge our funders for Survivor Space. So the Office for Victims of Crime provided grant funding for all of Survivor Space, including our Survivor Circles. So we are grateful for their funding support. All right, well, without further ado, I am so pleased to welcome Melanie and Diane today and really look forward to this conversation. So I will turn it over to the two of you.
Hi, everybody. We are so grateful to be here today. It would be great, I think, Diane, if we just do a little intro about like who we are, how we ended up here, and then we can get into it. I'll let you start.
Okay, my name is Diane Tarantini. I'm coming to you all from West Virginia. I am a survivor of child sexual abuse, and I've been recently saying I want to make lemonade from like the bitter lemons of my childhood. So to that end, I blog on the topic of child sexual abuse and prevention and healing from it. And I've written a children's book. And yeah, I'm really active on social media. And I'm a body safety educator in public schools in West Virginia on the topic of keeping kids safe.
And I'm Melanie Barton. I am a subject matter expert with Zero Abuse Project and Survivor Space. In addition, kind of the way I got here is I too am a survivor of child sexual abuse. I've worked in the field for over a decade in various roles, from forensic interviewing to family advocacy, crisis advocacy. This year is my 20-year kind of, I like to say, like my survivorversary. I started my healing journey about 20 years ago. That's not like the exact time where my first abuse happened, but that's where I like to say kind of my healing journey began about 20 years ago. And so it feels like a monumental year to have this conversation. And I'm really excited as we dive into it, not only to kind of share our experiences, but hopefully give some hope and kind of light at the end of the tunnel to survivors out there that, no matter what your journey looks like, it's not linear, and that's okay. But we're here to talk to you about kind of what that looked like for us and what helped us heal, maybe at different parts of our journey, because healing is not linear. And what may have worked for me at 12, 13 years old may not work for me at 32, And so just kind of talking about like the gamut of those things, of what we've done on our journeys to heal, and things that really have breathed life back into us and made that lemonade, like Diane said, out of those lemons. So, Diane, why don't you start and then I'll jump in?
Okay. One thing that I've discovered in like the last 18 months is a very interesting statistic. It says the average individual who's experienced child sexual harm, sexual abuse, will be 52 years old when they disclose. That's half your life if we're fortunate and blessed. I was 35 and when I finally disclosed in a firm manner, and it was to my family physician. I told my parents 3 times, and they well, two times at that point. They hadn't been real helpful. So I was really angry. And you're a young mom. So I had two little girls, and I just had our third child, a boy. And I was yelling a lot. I wasn't causing physical harm, but I was yelling a lot. I was super grumpy. I wanted everything to be perfect all the time. And my mom heart didn't want my children to, I called myself mean mommy back then. I didn't want my children to remember a hostile mom. Um, so a slight backup. When I disclosed to my doctor, it was like my third visit to him to get an antidepressant. Um, and my mom struggled with mental illness, and she was ashamed of that. So that kind of passed to me through osmosis. So I really struggled with taking an antidepressant. So when the first time I had held that prescription in my hand, I'm like, if I take this, does it mean I'm like flawed or not okay? But I decided, for the sake of my children, to take the antidepressant, and that helped. But then, like the third time I asked for it, my doctor, gosh, it was when my son was born, so it was 1999. My doctor was so ahead of his time, Mel. He said,
Mhm.
Diane, and I want everybody to hear this, antidepressants are often just a band-aid for a deeper problem. Is there a deeper problem? And I sat in the room and I thought to myself, um, which is going to have a better outcome? Keeping the secret for a couple more decades, um, or asking for help?
Mhm.
And I was scared to look him in the eyes. I don't know, like when you disclose to someone, you don't know, you're so vulnerable. You don't know
Mhm.
what you're going to see in their face. Is it going to be shock? Is it going to be me too? Is it
Mhm.
going to be pity or revulsion? Like I was scared of all the things, but what I saw was compassion. I was so grateful for that. And he wrote my prescription for Paxil, and he just started writing prescriptions for therapists and clinics in my town, and just
Yeah.
said, just keep going, and meeting people until you connect with someone. And if you need anything in the meantime, please contact me. So that was my first step. Oh, two
Yeah.
drugs. Drugs and disclosure.
Yeah. No, and I think that's really powerful that even back then there was, it gives hope for even especially more hope for now because there's been
Yes.
such developments in, healthcare and mental health care, that there even back then there was a compassionate physician, that was ready to receive a survivor. And I think, on both sides, really encouraging survivors to seek that out, but also providers to be that. And so, yeah, that's super powerful. And I think the cool thing is that we have very different experiences, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
my first kind of experience with disclosing was, my abuse happened when I was 12 years old, and my abuse was disclosed at 12 years old. And so it was in real time. And so really, it wasn't disclosed by me initially, it was disclosed by a friend that had gone through it the same day by the same person. It was a distant relative of hers. And so she kind of couldn't bear the weight of holding the secret. We had kind of pinky promised in our like 12-year-old way that we wouldn't say anything. And she was actually more of the one that didn't want to say anything. I was ready for help almost instantly because I couldn't deal with what was happening internally. We both started like self-injuring right away, and I just wanted that pain to stop. And so really, I had said like I'm going to tell somebody, and she's like, please don't. And so like we kind of pinky promised like we weren't going to say anything, and then she actually told her mom. And so that kind of kicked off my disclosure. It was kind of told for me initially. And then I was brought to a child advocacy center, which, if you don't know what a child advocacy center is, there's over 850 of them across the country. And it is the response for kids pretty much ages 2 to 17, depending on where you're at. Most counties in your state have one. And it's a national network of response to child sexual abuse, sexual assault under 17 years old. And so I went to this center, in real time. So the abuse had just happened over the, spring, summer. I was interviewed at the Child Advocacy Center, fairly within that time frame. And that's where I found my voice for the first time. The forensic interviewer that interviewed me, that's where I saw compassion for the first time. My mom, thankfully, did believe me, so I had support right away from family. But also, it was hard, to relate with my mom about this because it was breaking her heart as much as it was breaking mine. And so having like a third party, be compassionate and hear my story and kind of like, it was a neutral response. The interviewer didn't freak out when I told her. She was very compassionate. I did not tell her everything at that first interview. And I actually asked to go back 2 more times to tell her more details. And so that's not super common, but it does happen. The really cool thing is, when I was in college, I reached out to her I found her, she had left that job, years earlier, and was able to reconnect with her and thank her, because I had thanked kind of the team of people that helped me through the court process and all of that. And one of the biggest things that helped me heal too is reconnecting with those people on what I call my dream team. And so I was able to connect with her, 7 years after she interviewed me, and we had a cup of coffee when I was an adult in college. And I'm happy to say that what continues to help me heal is being connected with her. And so her and I are friends now. Like, we have calls once a month, and we do life together now, which is absolutely amazing. So yeah, that was kind of my first experience kind of with healing, going through the Child Advocacy Center process and having that kind of dream team around me. And I will say that not every survivor has that. And so I want to honor that here in this space, that not every survivor has that support right off the bat. I'm very grateful. But I want to encourage people out there to be that, no matter how hard the story is to hear, no matter how hard it is to even believe.
Yeah.
We need people out there to be supporting us as survivors right from the second we say it. And so just wanted to kind of caveat with that.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful story. I think so often, like I expressed, that you expect a negative response. I've never gotten a negative response except towards my abuser. People will tell you you're brave. They will thank you for sharing your story. So I think the majority of the time, and now I'm going to get it to the exception, the majority of the time, your loved ones are going to give you a positive response. Now, with that said, usually about 30% of survivors have experienced harm from a family member. And when that's the case, I don't know if this happened to your friend who it was her cousin, sometimes there is pushback and disbelief and shock. And so that can be a harder journey when you're the person who caused you harm was someone that your family loves and trusts.
And I love what you said earlier, though, just to kind of give kind of a hope in that you said, your doctor said, keep going until you find someone you connect with. I think that's the same as keep telling,
Oh, yes.
not until someone comes alongside you, because there is going to be that person that will come alongside you. And I think I've encouraged survivors to do that if their first response, because your first reaction when someone doesn't support you, when you first tell them, you're like, I'm not telling anyone ever again, but I think the kind of alternative to that, and that's okay if you have to do that for your own journey, but the alternative to that is like, keep surrounding yourself with people, and you will find those compassionate people who are going to walk alongside you. So I want to give a little hope to that caveat, that even if it wasn't the first person you told, there are people out there who will come alongside you, especially in these types of communities. And Survivor Space is one of those communities. So I want to give a little shout out there.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah. So what's something else that, really helped you heal as we kind of go down our journeys?
It's the next step in the journey. And I love that you had a trained individual, a forensic interviewer that's trained to not respond with shock or just really big emotions. So the first time I told my whole story, and I'm sure it probably took you more than an hour. It took me more than an hour. The telling in detail, and I often recommend to a trained professional because it's a lot for a friend to hold. It's a lot for a loved one when you start getting into details because you never know who's a survivor out there and you could be triggering an individual. But the first time I disclosed to my first therapist, I really lucked out. The first trained professional I worked with did a beautiful job. Like she handed me tissues. She sat across from me. She received everything. Um, and at the end, she said, I believe everything you said. It was wrong. It's it's very sad that your parents didn't protect you. And whatever you did to survive, I fully support you. And over, like to adults or to kids, I'm like, if it happened to you, these are my words to you. Or if someone ever discloses to them, this is a great script. But to the secret that you carry is a burden, it's a weight. And when you finally tell the secret, I think that weight, possibly that shame can come off of you. Did you have that experience?
Yeah, definitely. I think, obviously in that kind of more specific process, I kind of told my story, but as I started to tell my story outside of that process, that's where the shame really left. I mean, I definitely felt a sense of shame leaving that day when I went to be interviewed, but that kept happening. I think I needed more than one day to have that shame fall off. And so as I continued to kind of share my story, and especially as, I went to college, started doing things, sharing my story even more publicly. And that's not for every survivor, but that was healing for me. And that helped me continue to have the shame lift is, opportunities to share my story or to be involved in advocacy like things or events on my college campus, things like that could kind of continually take that shame and kind of put it aside and say, that is not yours, to carry. Like, this is actually something that can help people. And, kind of like that lemonade you were talking about. So yeah, I definitely, experienced that along my journey and even still, I think there's parts of my story that I held closer through the years. And as those things kind of opportunities to share those things or walk through those things, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, I believe, but, things like the Unleash course that you and I were both a part of, like taking off the layers of the onion that, like, I had been on this healing journey for, a decade and then another decade. But there are still some things along the line, because healing is not linear, that were held a little bit closer that I needed to kind of say out loud even. And that might be it. Like, I just need to say it out loud and then I can move forward from it, So yeah, I think that's super powerful.
I went through multiple kinds of therapy. I don't know if you did, but I did talk therapy with
Mm-hmm.
that first wonderful individual. And then she like funneled me into two other modalities, art
Mm-hmm.
therapy and then body work. Um, and there was a brief stint with like couples counseling that didn't work out because that particular professional was not a good fit
Mm-hmm.
for me and for my husband. But did you do anything besides talk therapy?
Yeah. So I did talk therapy for a long time and then was kind of funneled into EMDR
Oh, I
therapy
did.
for a specific event I had repressed abuse from prior to when I was 12, from two other perpetrators. And so really being able to walk through those memories to a point. Like, I'll never know everything, but I was working in the field already when those memories resurfaced. So being able to kind of really process that in a tangible kind of, not quick way, but like, let's face this here. um instead of carrying that, for another decade. And so yeah, I did those two kind of modalities. I think within those two there were things that were kind of like planted within there, like some creative stuff, some writing. I had a great, in addition to kind of like my dream team, the advocates and the detective that arrested my perpetrator, and other people that were really supportive to me along my journey, my middle school teachers that were able to kind of give me kind of some grace in my schooling at that time during when I was going through a trial and stuff. In addition to that, it was those couple therapists along the line, and just kind of really being able to kind of process those things in different ways, and that creativity, because I think it can be really healing. Like, obviously talk therapy can help. It may not be for everyone, so look at a different option. Some people would really thrive in the art, the art avenue, and some people would really thrive in EMDR. Some people would really thrive in even just journaling or writing, and having a therapeutic person to read those things to. And so I think there's power in the uniqueness of your journey,
Yes.
in walking through what you've been through.
Yes. It's so funny you just brought up something that I forgot about. It's not even on my list. When I was in grad school to get an MFA in creative nonfiction, one of the exercises we did in workshop was, and I now know that this is pretty famous in healing circles, write the letter you'll never send, or write the letters, plural. Um, and so we did it in a group, and there were so many people that had so many issues, and every single letter made every single one of us just cry with compassion for our peers. But I've written a letter to my abuser. I've written a letter to my mother, and that I know that some people will never go into therapy. I know some people will never disclose, but I think writing that letter and journaling, like you said, um, can be very therapeutic. Just because if you take the secret and take it outside of your body, there is healing in that process.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. What's something else kind of like maybe different than what we've already talked about that, helped you on your journey too?
Um, so like my son's birth is my benchmark because that's the year that kind of um, elicited the beginning of my journey. And that can happen if you're a mother, when you become a mother, or when your child becomes the age that you were. Stuff can come out at that point, which clearly was happening for me. But that was 1999. And then in the next year or two, I came to faith. And oh gosh, Mel, I remember wrestling like, if you're a person of faith and you believe God sees everything. I'm like, so dude, you saw it.
Yeah.
Why the heck didn't you
Yeah.
stop it? And that was a wrestling match. And
Mhm.
I just came to believe that we know bad things happen to good people,
Mhm.
but um, God weeps over things like this. And he was there, and it deeply wounded him, but I was not alone. And so um yeah, my faith and being able to pray and take things to my the person of my worship, the individual of my worship, that's really helped me a lot, um is my faith. How about
Yeah.
you?
And yeah, and I would say the same thing. I came to faith many years after my healing journey started. And I think, I battled in the match as well, very similarly. And still at times, when things would come up, it's like, like why is this continuing to manifest, and in my mind and my body. I had, in a previous circle, I talked about how it manifested physically through pelvic pain and pelvic issues, and how that could have really impacted my future intimate relationships. Even dating, I wouldn't date anybody because I was afraid of what was going on in my body. I didn't know yet that there was something actually going on, but I knew pretty well that there was. And so, um, it really could have, kind of sabotaged all of that for me if I, waited to kind of face it. But I think with my faith journey as well, and that can be really difficult for survivors. And I feel really fortunate that I'm able to have that journey, that faith, kind of on my side, and really be able to kind of reconcile with the fact that yes, God saw it all, God was there. I don't feel those things anymore, like where were you? Like I don't ask that question anymore, and I don't question the existence of God in the situation. But something really beautiful that I heard really early on my journey in regards to faith, it was actually Nicole Braddock Bromley. I know she's a great inspiration to us both. I was at one of her speaking engagements, and she referenced a piece of scripture that said, praise be to the God of our Father, Lord Jesus Christ, who's the Father of compassion, who comforts us in our troubles so that we can comfort others in the comfort that we have received from him. And so that has really carried on my journey. I was not a believer back then. I did not have faith back then, when I was hearing that for the first time, but it kind of resurrected when I defined my faith and as I was getting baptized. And so that was really powerful. And I always go back to that of like, that compassion, that even can apply outside of faith that we were just talking
Oh
about.
yeah. Yeah.
That we can have that compassion, that we carry with us, and if we didn't go through what we went through, maybe we wouldn't have that level of compassion. So kind of seeing it as a gift in a way, and being able to share that gift with others, that we've received. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a beautiful young woman. She's starting to get some traction in the world, Kate Bowler, um, who wrote a book called Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved. And that really helped me think about the when bad things happen to hard people. But one thing that you mentioned that is another thing that wasn't on my list when you talked about your pelvic pain repercussions. Um, One of the resources that's been super helpful for me is the book The Body Keeps the Score. So it just Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and I heard about him through Brene Brown's work, talks about how trauma uh, is laid down in every cell of your body and it's going to come out. And he's not just talking about sexual abuse, he's talking about rape and crime and going to war or seeing your house burn down or being in a car wreck. Like all of these things can sit with you and have physical repercussions. And when I read the book, one of the things that can happen to a survivor is focus issues. And I remember when my kids were little, they'd go, now, mom, focus. Like they knew I had focus issues and like the hypervigilance, anxiety, depression, self-harm, eating disorders, or disordered eating, suicidal ideation. I loved um, hearing or reading that the science behind why I am the way I am. Did you read the book?
I did, yeah, a long time ago when I was kind of starting my advocacy
Yeah.
career. But yeah, it really speaks to that. I've experienced that, like manifesting,
Yes.
15 years later physically, where I knew something was not right, but I like really couldn't face it until my mind and body were ready to. And that was like in the midst of I had started the process and then was in a relationship for really the first time ever in a serious way. I mean, I dabbled in relationships through the years, but nothing where it was like, oh, this could actually like go somewhere. Like, and similar to like when you become a mom, but like when you meet these milestones as a survivor, there are things that can come up. And so, something that like I wouldn't, pursue, like reading about pelvic floor issues, maybe when I was like 13 or 14, even though it was in my body and I knew something wasn't right. This is like 15 years later, and now I'm pursuing other resources. And so I think kind of having that open hand as a survivor of like, okay, like I've done all of this for this many years, all this, the therapy and the, maybe medication. I experienced, went through that as well early on my journey. But right now, like I don't feel the need for medication, at this time in my life, which is amazing, and haven't for many years. But I do need to stay connected to my people and like stay connected to my pelvic floor therapist and stay connected to, my circle, my survivor circle, I'll call it. And, kind of, as Nicole puts it as well, like a circle of inspiration, those who are there to walk alongside you to do life with you on this healing journey. And so like, I think that's the beauty of being open-handed with your healing journey, that things may apply early on that don't apply later on, or you pick things back up that maybe helped you years ago that can help you in this season. So I think the ebb and flow of it is something to pay attention to.
Right. One thing you and I have talked about is um, how valuable and healing it can be to write your story. Another writing exercise we did in grad school was mapping like your neighborhood or your house or the place where it happened. And you want to do that alone and with a big piece of paper and some time to reflect. But you've written guest blog posts for me. I've written parts of my story in blog posts on my website. And I'm working on a memoir now. I think you started having tickles of maybe that would be something you'd want to
Yeah.
do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but just and I think when you do this, you often can recover some details. And I just think the more you know, it can be scary
Yeah.
to recover stuff like I just this week, I'm working with the developmental editor. I found an envelope and it's full of emails and journal pages from me, emails from like my siblings, and it gave me more pieces to the puzzle. And
Yeah.
it's it's enlightening, it's shocking, but I'm so glad I know it because that's my childhood that a lot of I don't know if this happened to you, like there was a lot of blocks like around that time. Did you
Yeah.
like kind of lose who you
Yeah.
when in that month or year that it happened?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And there were some pieces of the journey, like especially like working in the field too, like that I wanted to know, like what was the charge that he was actually charged with, and like what, like things that I'm like, I'm not 100% sure. So I actually did request my court file, as a part of my healing journey. And actually, I use that now when I speak. I speak for with actually Dr. Timothy Sarr, who's in West
Love that. I've
Virginia.
seen those
And
presentations.
so him and I do some presentations regarding my forensic interview to trial. And so we took my court file and kind of analyzed it both for me as the survivor, but also an advocate from working in the field of like kind of how to equip, like what has been done better since then, what can be done better still, but also, just reflecting on what it, to put people in the shoes of a survivor walking through the process. And so that was really healing to kind of, I mean, again, like initially it was very hard to go through that file tooth and nail. Like it was hard to see some things in there. But I did also learn some things about my abuser that helped me heal a bit. That he, again, not an excuse for what he did, but he had been abused as a child. Some other things that helped me navigate kind of my own journey of things I just didn't know, years
Yes.
earlier, and
Yes.
wouldn't know because I was so young going through it. And so, and even the medical component, I was able to see that there was a little thing noted in my exam that they weren't sure. They thought like would kind of go away as I grew, but it actually didn't. And so, being like really validated on my journey through those things. Looking back on some poetry that I had written years earlier of like, and that was really cool to see like, wow, something I wrote back then, it was kind of dark and like difficult to read. But then as I walked through those poems, there was a light that started to form in my writing. And so it went from like really dark all the time to like there's this glimmer of light that goes throughout. And that's, I say that my book is marinating still. It's been marinating for like 7 years. I started it like 7 years ago. But it's exciting to think about, kind of processing through some of that stuff and getting it into print. And but again, that's not for every survivor, but even
Right.
just for yourself, you never
Yes.
have to put it out there. um just to kind of have some of those pieces or share some of those pieces. And there's great opportunities with Survivor Space specifically, to, share things, survivor stories and writing and poetry. And so definitely connect if that's something that you're like really you really want to be a part of. And that can be done anonymously, so no one ever has to know it was you. And so and again, with Diane's, platform as well, and I'm building mine as well, so opportunities for survivors' voices to be elevated, even if it's in an anonymous creative way, like a poem or a storytelling or sharing your story. I know that I'm open to receiving that. I'm hopeful Diana is as well. So I know Becky has our contact info, so feel free to pass that along to anyone who may reach out at another time. But yeah, so I think all of those things are really, really powerful.
I think what you touched on, like, if you choose to do advocacy work, and someone recently referred to it as activism, and that like both scared and thrilled me. But I I do reels every Tuesday on Instagram, and I talk about this topic. And I've always been open to, I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. It was familial. And it was child on child sexual abuse. My offender was under the age of 18 as well for a period of time. He dipped into adulthood, which was, um, yeah, a new thing that I just recently, I did the math and the investigation. And I figured, oh my goodness, 19, that's an adult. That's criminal.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but here recently, and I'm just gonna, this is the first time I've said this. Um, to grown-ups. I said it for the first time in 3 body safety assemblies last week. Um, because it's in my memoir and people are going to know. My abuser was my older brother,
Mm-hmm.
and he was 5 years older than me. So that's known as sibling sex abuse. And it is, Melanie, when I faced 200 middle schoolers and said that, I said, I spoke to you last year. You kind of know my story. There's something that I withheld, but I'm going to speak it now. I personally wasn't prepared for the level of moans and groans and squeals. But
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
you guys, I'll give you like 30 seconds, get it out. It is uncomfortable. It
Mm-hmm.
is, it is gross. It was wrong. Like, just their response was affirming, because kids knew it was wrong. Like when my parents didn't deal with it ideally, like these kids just reflected back to me, what happened to you was not okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a scripture. I don't know if y'all remember King David from the Bible. He literally says, I, I'll do whatever I'll get so raw and real. I'll embarrass myself all for the cause. And that's
Mm-hmm.
me. I'll I will tell you how to prevent it, how to heal from it. I will tell you my own story. I will not give you details because I think your brain will fill that in. But
Yeah.
I am willing to lay my truth out for the benefit, for the greater good, for
Mm-hmm.
kids, for survivors. And I believe silence serves the abuser,
Yeah.
and speaking out serves the survivor community. I need to make a social
Yeah.
media image of that. Um,
Yeah, that's good.
but it is, I feel like I'm just I'm just prodding. I'm just keeping the little hash marks. Abuser 1, Diane
Mm-hmm.
on her like 35th body safety assembly, 35. Like,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
how I don't, it's not a competition, but this is how I win, Mel.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
I
think
don't
everybody's
shut
journey.
my mouth. I don't
Yeah.
stay quiet. I
Yeah.
don't
And it's
cower.
so good. And I hope it's empowering people out there that are like on the fence about like,
You don't
how
have to
do I
be
bring this to
us.
the next level? Yeah. And again, again, I keep going back to Nicole, and we'll talk about the course that we both went through, I think, to close it out. But I think, she has put on her social media before, we are not all called to a platform, but we are called to use our voice. And so
Oh,
whatever that, I love that. It's like
that's
fire, fire,
great.
fire emojis, and I think that's so powerful because it gives survivors, the out. Like, I'm not going to speak to like 30 100,000 people a year, about my story, or even remotely. I'm not going to ever step on a stage or ever do a blog post or ever do a podcast or ever do, Diane, the things that you and I are doing. But to use that voice however works for you in your journey. But we just encourage you to use your voice and find that modality that works for you, whether it be writing,
Yeah.
speaking, putting it somewhere, drawing, whatever that is. Like, I can't draw things, but I can speak things, and so I just think it's a beautiful, it doesn't put the pressure on the survivor to be like, you have to be speaking, all, but I think it also kind of is this kind of I can't think of the word, but like basically like an empowering thing where it's like,
Yes.
we are all called to use our voice,
Yeah.
and however that looks for you can be powerful, whatever way you decide to do it, but do it,
Right. Yeah.
so I think it's it's really powerful in that way.
Yeah. So you talked about Nicole. So we have to talk about Nicole. And I think you're
Yeah.
the person, I think I saw one of your posts on social media and I said, I want to do that. So I signed up for my first Unleash. My first session was, um, you weren't in there, but my second one you were, right?
I wasn't in there with you at all yet. Like, I
Oh,
haven't,
okay.
we
Okay.
were, yeah, but we were both
Okay.
in different ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think let's preface this with, like, the exciting thing about these types of things is connecting with other survivors. And I think you and I both
Yes.
had that on our list of like
Yes.
how we were able to heal, is to
Yeah.
get alongside other survivors, whether that be we're like down the journey a bit from them and pouring into them, and or for
Yes.
me, Nicole was someone who was kind of light years ahead of me on the journey when I was 12, 13. And, I've really looked to her as a source of hope and encouragement, and that there was a light to begin with at the end of the tunnel. And, now her and I are kind of more tandem rather than her being so far ahead, but she's done a lot more with her journey and her story. But I think, getting down to the grassroots of that, of like just sitting in a space with other survivors, and that's the goal of Survivor Space as well, that like we're all just in a
Yes.
unified front of like sharing the exciting things we're doing outside of our stories. Like, hey, like I got an award for basketball, or I'm doing a dance recital, or these are things that apply to me, but just like celebrating each other's wins even
Yes.
outside of our stories.
Right.
And so I would love for you to share your experience. And Nicole and I are actually doing a survivor circle in April, talking more about our connection and
Oh, that's so cool.
kind of that journey. But talk about your experience in
Um,
Unleash and what that was like for you.
yeah, so I'll describe how it goes down. So you sign up and there's a fee, but my goodness, it is so much less than actual therapy. It's like, yeah, 3 therapy sessions. Um, but you get materials. So you're going to get journal or a beautiful, I love the illustrations in the journal with the journal prompts that she does, and fantastic videos featuring Nicole and featuring different survivors with different stories. I loved those stories. But then once a week, you meet on Zoom for an hour and they super duper respect your time. And it's Nicole Bromley, who's a survivor and a trauma informed therapist. And then anywhere from, I don't know if they cap it out at 8 or 10
I
survivors.
think it's about 8.
Um,
Yeah, it's at 8.
yeah, you can choose to disclose. You can just sit and watch. Um, but they very gently guide us through 8. Is it 6 or 8, Mel?
It's 8 weeks. I think
Yeah,
I have the book right
yeah,
here. Yeah.
8 sessions.
It's, yep.
And there's usually a topic every time, like forgiveness or I just really remember that particular
Yeah.
session.
Yeah. Like stories and,
Yeah.
different, yeah. Stories is one of them. Steps, costs,
Yes. Oh, right. Yeah.
wolves,
Yes.
masks, all these kind of one word topics that have prompts
Yes.
to go along with them. Um, and I know doing this like so many years down the line, I thought like, how is this gonna, again, I'm very
Yes.
inspired by Nicole, and like I'm I totally am into anything she's doing. Like, I'm in, like, count me in. But, there's always that thought of like, I'm 20 years down this healing road. Like,
Yes.
how is this gonna impact me or help me, and let me tell you, it's unlike anything I've ever done before. And it's like such a positive way to heal from some of these things. It doesn't stay in the dark where like you could linger there for a while in other ways, like other things that you could be involved in, but it's very much like, okay, here's the hard thing. What's this been like for you? But also like, look at it this way. And there's such value in like shifting the narrative, shifting the perspective to something positive of like, okay, this was really hard, but like, take a look back at your childhood self and what is something you used to do, as a child that you could do right now that like we could talk about next week, and like go do it and tell us how it went. And so like mine was like cartwheels on the beach. I used to do that. I used to do cartwheels from like home to first base in softball when I was really little. And so cartwheels, I always wanted to be a gymnast. And so like cartwheels on the beach, and like I live right near the ocean. So I'm like, I'm going to go do a cartwheel on the beach. And
Yay.
so reporting back on that, it was just like, it wasn't a heavy thing. It wasn't like I went and like talked to my abuser or like did anything crazy monumental that way, but it was just like this was a cool experience to kind of reflect on like before my abuse where I was doing cartwheels all the time. And
Yeah.
so but then there's also harder things that you can kind of walk through, and so it
Yeah.
gives room for both. And I think that's really unique.
Yeah, one of the things that I loved, and I love this whenever I'm in a survivor space, I just am so inspired by the courage of the participants. Just to hear the different hard things that people experienced, and the things they've done as a result is just, it's so moving. Um, and there were people that, oh, gosh, you have the privilege of being on the screen the first time they say. Um, so I just want to tell you a 2-minute version of my story. And then like when you're on the eighth session, you literally see growth in pretty much every participant. Um,
Yeah, no matter
yeah,
whether you've been doing this for,
yes,
whether this is your first time saying it, or
yes,
if you've been speaking, for years about your
right.
story,
I
and it's
mean,
just a solidarity.
I went into the group thinking I was fully healed, and then you hear Nicole say, "Oh, but healing is a lifelong journey." I'm like, "Oh, well, no one
Yeah.
told me that." But
Yeah.
it is.
But
She's so
then as
right.
things
I've
come
done it
up,
over.
you can be encouraged by that. Like as things
Yes,
come up, you can be encouraged that like
yes.
it's like this for everybody, no matter how far along you are. And it kind of puts you on kind of that even playing field of like, we're all going to navigate things, but we're going to navigate it. And like, it's healing.
Another thing that I love, and there's a meme to this effect going around. I love it when my friends are more pissed off about what happened to me than I am. Like when you say your
Yeah.
things, if you choose to say your things, and just everybody speaks into your life with affirmation and positivity and love, that's a beautiful, oh gosh, that's
Yeah.
so beautiful. That's so healing. I'm like you. I was in both my groups. I was the oldest. I was farther along in my journey than others. And they literally told me that my superpower is not feeling shame. And they're like, "How do you do that?" I'm like, "So here's what you need to know. They are the bad person. You are not."
Mm. Yeah.
Um, because I think that, I mean, that's one of the reasons I didn't tell. Um, I thought I wouldn't be believed, and I thought I'd be blamed.
Yeah.
And I know that no child that experiences these things, we are never to blame. It is
Yeah.
always the abuser's fault. It is always the abuser's fault. Say that to yourself a million times. It is
Yeah.
always their fault, not yours. That's what you
Yeah.
must know. And this, yeah, just get it in your bones, get it in your cells.
Yeah.
But yeah, unleash. And here's the thing: if you do it multiple times, because you already have the materials, you have those videos, you have that workbook that you can download and print off the PDF. It's half the price and subsequent times, subsequent
Yeah.
visits. And sometimes
Yeah.
I know I've funded scholarships before. So
Yeah.
maybe
So you
I'll
have
do
an
that.
opportunity to give back as well.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a way you could give back.
yeah.
Financially
Yeah.
support survivors going through, like, I'll pay for your counseling session. If you go, I'll pay for it.
Yeah.
If you are resourced, um, yeah, if you've got
Yeah.
financial
Yeah, it's a
resources,
cool way. Yeah,
that
it's
would
a
be a
cool way
cool
to give
way.
back. And, and I think the cool thing too is like, we both were kind of like down the road a bit, but I learned so much from those early on the journey because I like forgot some of the things that like, oh, like that can apply. Like this far down the road, you do so many different things that it's like, okay, like this one thing has come up for me this many years down the road. Like sometimes I got to go back to the original playbook, you
Yeah.
know? And so I think that was really powerful for me to like connect with survivors who were just starting their journey. It gave me kind of a fresh look on, you know, those types of things that could kind of carry through the healing journey. And I think that's the beauty of being connected with other survivors. We're all at a different place. We're all
Yeah.
doing different things with our story, with our journey. And I think it's just really powerful to kind of share those things and celebrate when survivor to survivor. Because I
Yeah.
think, it's that much more powerful coming from a survivor to be like, I'm celebrating your win because I know like the
Oh,
core of
yes.
that, rather than
Yes.
just like your day-to-day person being like, great job, you know. So
Yeah, the very first time I was unleashed years old when I learned the term no contact.
mm,
And it was from a young, yeah, it was from a young girl a young woman, she's not a girl, um, whose family, they just weren't, they didn't have her back. And they were continuing to have contact with the organization in which she was harmed. And she's just like, and they just were just like, keep, just bury it, baby, just bury it. Forgive and forget. And she just couldn't do it. And so I'd never heard of that option. And whether it's for a season or forever, that can be an option. And I know so many people are like, blood is thicker than water. You have to forgive your parents. Yeah. Don't let anybody tell you what you do and don't have to do with regards to your healing. Wouldn't you agree, Mel?
yeah, absolutely. And a big thing for me has been boundaries. Like I never thought I had the liberty to set boundaries, and we could probably do a whole survivor circle on that alone.
Indeed.
But like, I think recently in my journey, like even with parents or like, other family members on my journey, even though they weren't directly related to my abuse itself, it's like unhealthy relationships there,
Oh,
complicated, or,
yes.
and it's like in my healing era, I'm gonna set these boundaries here. And it's not because I don't love you, and it's not because I'm taking things away from you. It's because I want to salvage what we have left.
Hmm.
And I have the maturity and growth on my own healing journey because of what I've been through already to set these boundaries in love. And because I want to salvage, because if we continue on this way, it's going to be no contact. And
Yeah.
so, and that's been super powerful that I could kind of put a protection both for myself but also for that person to not lose out completely, especially
Yeah.
now that I'm a new mom, and with family it can be complicated of like, I'm not tolerating this for her. So
Right.
like, yeah, and so that was hard to come to, but so freeing. And I actually was in an Unleash group this time around, kind of going through that process and even a little bit on the tail end of last time. And, being able to be in a space and to be able to unpack that, even though wasn't directly correlated
Mhm.
to my abuse, but also very much so
Yeah.
in a lot
Yeah.
of ways. So it's like, it can touch on a lot of different things, and it can be healing in ways that you don't expect. And I think that's the beauty of it. And that's what Survivor Space has been to me too, of like, I was, kind of hired on to kind of create some content and do a couple things, but what it's been since then has been above and beyond that. And it's been such a beautiful place of connection. So that is the encouragement to survivors out there to get connected to places like Unleash, Nicole
Yeah.
Braddock Bromley's organization,
Yeah.
One Voice. Get connected with Diane, what she's doing,
Yeah.
myself, what I'm doing. Find your place that you feel, you know part of. These survivor communities are sacred, and they're really, and they're not just like for a time in your life, they're like for life.
Mhm. Yeah.
To do life alongside of people or get creative with telling your story, having having capacity to kind of explore what that looks like with support around you, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, and I'll do a little shout out for Survivor Space. We do have a page that is kind of, you have to join it, so you can't just like be on
On
it,
there.
but it's a Facebook page, and it's called Survivor Space, and you can kind of see what's going on, you know, when these circles are happening, opportunities for different things. And sometimes survivors even post on there something that they're working on or they're a part of, or, you know, again, celebrating each other's wins. So definitely join that. I think Becky could maybe send out the link,
Yeah.
or put it in the chat. I know she just put the Unleash link directly in the chat. So she's on top of it over there, Becky.
Yeah.
And we appreciate that. But yeah, so
And
any
there's
final thoughts? I know we're coming up
yeah,
on, we've got about
no,
5 minutes
no.
left.
I
So
I just want to say if anyone is a survivor of sibling sexual abuse, there is a closed Facebook group of SSA peers, and it is a lot of people, yeah, talking about the hard things with their family or their abuser or their emotional health. So yeah, that's a great place to be. It's survivors supporting survivors. But yeah, I think we've touched on so many things like get the meds if you need them,
yeah,
disclose if you can, get counseling if you can, get connected with people with the same lived experience, um, and consider doing some things to, yeah, to turn that gray cloud, give it a silver lining of the thing that happened to you.
mhm,
Yeah,
yeah. So I think at
great.
this point we can open it up to any last comments or
Yeah,
questions from the chat or anybody that's tuning in currently. If not, we'll turn it over to you, Becky, to close it out.
Great. Thank you both so much. We don't have any questions or comments in the chat, but we still have a couple of minutes before the end of the hour. But thank you all so much. Just so was off camera, of course, listening, and I'm just like doing this and like, preach, like, yes, behind the scenes. So thank you all so much. I mean, so much of what you shared resonates with me and my experience, and definitely a lot of survivors that I've worked with over the years. So it's just so empowering to just talk about these things in an open way, like to normalize the experience that survivors go through, because there's nothing wrong with being a survivor and struggling or being at different points in your healing process, and just being able to talk about that the same as with the same kind of openness that you would talk about, like, hey, what restaurant did you go to last night, like what did you have, just normalizing the experience of survivors is so important, and being able to kind of foster that sense of community. So thank you both for doing that.
sure. I
Yeah,
think if you
that's great.
Google how many survivors are there in the United States of child sexual abuse, it's 42 million.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
don't ever think you're alone. Don't ever think you're
absolutely.
alone. There's a ton of us. We just need to find each other and hold hands. Um, every harm situation will be different. Every healing journey will be different.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah. I love to look at it like I was part of a campaign kind of a couple years ago, and it was talking about like survivors are kind of a stars in a galaxy, and we're like
yes, I
all
saw that.
widespread, the Shine campaign. And really this big galaxy is huge, right? And there's survivors everywhere, kind of the stars of the galaxy. And when one survivor kind of comes forward or does one of these things that we've talked about, those stars are a little bit brighter, and people are kind of unifying in those communities and banding together. And yeah, so that's kind of a visual. I'm a very
Yes,
visual person sometimes, and so I just love the thought of like when one survivor's light turns on, another's does across the country, and so it's just a beautiful way to keep us all connected.
indeed.
I
I
love
love
that
it.
analogy. Like, you can look up at the night sky, and the stars that you see are other survivors that are there with you. And even if it's cloudy, you know that they're there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and even on the darkest night, they're bright as ever actually on the
Yeah,
darkest night. So yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. I really appreciate you being here today and sharing of yourselves. I mean, just such a great conversation. I want more. I want more than just 1 hour, but we'll take it a bit at a time, right?
Sure.
So, well, thank you all so much. And for those folks joining us, please feel free to reach out if you have any follow-up questions or want to, want more information about anything that was discussed today. And please keep an eye on Survivor Space for our upcoming Survivor Circles. So thank you all so much. Take care, and we will see you all again soon.
Thanks for the opportunity to share. I
See you
loved it.
next time.
Okay, bye, everybody.